Hi everyone, my name is John and today I'll be going through the New South Wales Selective Exam in 2022 and how it was rescheduled and postponed from Thursday the 10th of March to Thursday the 31st of March. This means students will have 3 more weeks for the new test date compared to what was originally stated. And in today's video, I will go through why this occurred, what could have been done better in my opinion, and my thoughts for what students should do now in order to prepare for this new test date. And is the 31st of March actually 100% confirmed, or could it potentially be another date really? Let's get into it. So why did the test date change in the first place? For many months, students and parents were expecting the test to go ahead as scheduled on Thursday, the 10th of March, 2022. According to their statement on Wednesday, the 9th of March, which is the day before at the time of this recording, it was due to a flood emergency across all of New South Wales, as well as the impacts of COVID-19. Although with the weather being much better in New South Wales in many areas, on Wednesday, the 9th, parents and students were still hopeful that the test would proceed as expected. However, there were still more than 310 schools across New South Wales that were closed. Although this number does include high schools, there were a large amount of primary schools that were also affected, as you can see in the image on the screen here as well. This means there were lots of students who were not able to actually do the test as the schools were just not accessible. Classrooms were damaged from the water, and some schools were becoming a safety hazard, and it needed to dry up and make sure the builders were in there to make sure that it was safe for all students. An additional reason was that there were also a few COVID outbreaks in primary schools, and even among the students that we teach too here at Biggs Academy. This included a few OC classes where there were students who are definitely gifted, because if you're not gifted, you generally can't go to an OC class in the first place. And they would not have gotten the opportunity to do the test at all that day because they got COVID. So what is the typical process for people who actually miss the exam? Generally, students who miss the selective exam for whatever reason will have to provide evidence and proof to show that they actually have a valid excuse, such as if the student had COVID-19. Then there is a possibility they will base it off the marks from the school report, or they will get you to do another test on another day, which could either be the exact same test or it might be slightly different. The challenging and annoying part here is that parents and students for this year in 2022 had no idea what was going to happen. Let's say a student was sick because they had COVID on the test of the exam. They may still feel the effects of COVID the days after, so as a result, and to make sure that COVID and the sickness does not spread, they will put the exam date maybe a week or 2 after 10th of March, for instance, for any students that have kind of missed the exam. But what if there's someone who's still sick or sick again? Then what kind of happens? That is where the school report would typically come in, but this year did not take into consideration the school mark component in the gradings because of all the school lockdowns in 2021. This means that students and parents who supply their school report for the year before, in year 5, would not have an accurate picture of the student's ability. So the department is going to have a really tough job in determining, okay, well, have a look at their school report for the year before and see what their likelihood of performing in the New South Wales selective exam is. Even if there wasn't school lockdowns, basing it off the school report is already a tough ordeal. So that's why it's not going to generally be in your favor if you had to be in that situation. And with so many people affected by the floods and so many people who are sick because of COVID, there were just way too many people to actually complete a retest. This has resulted in many parents frustrated about the lack of answers and ambiguity regarding the process if they could not make the actual exam. Do they do the same test on another day, or do they do a slightly different test on another day, or do they use the school report for the year before, even if it's not a completely accurate picture? Parents and students had zero idea about what would actually happen, and understandably, they were angry. So if you could not make the actual exam, the only information that they will tell you is to complete an illness and misadventure form. But every situation is very different, and they would assess each case on a case-by-case basis. So what will happen on one student will be different to another, which led to even more questions. So what could have actually been done better, and what is there to come? If it were up to me, it is completely understandable that the test was pushed back. Having it on the 10th of March was too dangerous because of all these different situations, and it was outside of their control in terms of flooding. What annoys me personally though, and many others, is the extremely short notice that the department actually gave. They only gave students and parents notice of about half a day really. They told us 1 p.m. the day before on the 9th of March when the test is on the 10th of March. It was obvious from the data and the weather forecast that this was not going to improve dramatically in such a short time. And what I would have liked, and many parents would have liked, is if they just gave more notice compared to just saying it at 1 p.m. from the actual exam date the day before. They could have provided specific information regarding what happens if you get COVID and cannot make the exam, beyond just saying to fill out this illness and misadventure form that will be available on the 10th of March. If your school was affected by flooding, for instance, they could have just said, do X, Y, Z, and you could do a test later on, or we'll do this instead. But they just didn't provide any information on their website. They just said to fill out this form. And when you call them, they didn't really answer back or provide a very clear response. Instead, all they did was tell parents to fill out this form, and the response rate, the way that they responded, was generally not satisfactory. But an interesting fact from the statement is something that I really wanted to share with you, because in the Department of Education statement, it said up to 15,000 students were expected to do the test on the 10th of March. In 2021, there were 15,355 students who actually did the exam. And this means that there could be a few hundred less who are going to be doing this exam in 2022. We don't fully know this because their wording is quite generic and broad. They said up to 15,000 students, but I am actually curious to see how many students end up doing the exam in 2022 with so many crazy things happening. I would not be surprised if some parents actually pull their children out from the exam because of the stress of COVID, worrying about the exam being pushed back again and again, or the floods. Imagine if your home was impacted by the floods and half your house is damaged. That is not going to be good in terms of morale and mindset. So me as a parent, I would definitely, in that circumstance, pull my child out from actually doing the selective exam, because it's going to be added pressure, and the chances of them performing at their optimal level will be very low. If anyone is in the situation where they are facing a very tough situation like flooding and they're just not too sure about what to do, please do reach out to me, and my team will try to help you guys out in any way that we can. We'll be more than happy to provide advice and steer you in the right direction. We can also suggest what you might be able to do as well. Let's now look at the takeaways. The biggest takeaway here for students is to prepare for this new test date, which is the 31st of March 2022. There will be a new statement of authority letter, which will detail any changes or accommodations in terms of the venue and the time that you have to arrive at the place. This may actually change from what you originally received, especially if your school is still damaged and they may have to put you into another school in terms of doing the actual exam. That means there is exactly 3 weeks to go based on this new test date. This can either be a pro or a con, depending on where you're currently at and your outlook as well. This is advantageous for some students who are honestly still not prepared. Students who still require that extra time and started late in terms of the practice will be able to benefit from this. They can study more and focus on the areas that they are still weak in. I have reviewed many comments in my last video where I shared some tips that I thought was very important, where people wrote down the estimated marks in each of the different subjects and they wanted to see their likelihood of making it in. Honestly, me telling you that you can get it in based on the marks that you're giving me doesn't really matter or change anything. What your scores that you're telling me is actually trying to tell you are the areas that you are strong in and the areas that you still need help in. You know personally which areas that you're a lot more confident in compared to the areas where you're not very good in at the moment. In these next 3 weeks, I recommend you to purely focus on the areas that you are struggling in, as you will get more return from it. If you are already getting 18 out of 20 in your writing consistently, there's not much more point in actually doing that. Take advantage of the extra time to work on a subject area that you are much weaker in. You're going to get a much better return on your investment. Take advantage of the extra time and don't laze around. If you put in more work here, you may not have to put in more work or even consider transferring into another selective high school in years 7 to 10. And trust me, that process is a lot harder than the test is in year 6. So if you work hard and you actually make it into the school that you want to make it in this time around, it will save you so much time in the future. On the other hand, there is a con. So the con for this is that for some students, they're already prepared. They were fully expecting the test to go ahead on the 10th of March, and they've been practicing for about a year for this exam, or even longer if we take into consideration the OC time, etc. Their fundamentals are already quite strong, and they were ready to get this test over and done with. Free time and relaxation was just around the corner and on the horizon. Some families were already planning some holidays around the selective test. And my thoughts on this is that it just sucks. I know. Spend today and only spend one day moaning and groaning, complaining and being angry. Cry if you want. But tomorrow, there is no time to still complain. You need to continue your hard work, because even though you were prepared for this exam, if you don't do anything for these next 3 weeks, the students who are less prepared for you but are working hard in these next 3 weeks could actually get a score that's better than what you did. You worked hard consistently for a much longer period. Don't give up now. The finish line is around the corner. Complain for one day. I know it sucks, but make sure to forget about it and just look ahead. Remember that the Department of Education will, in quotes, will continue to monitor the situation and make further adjustments as required in the advent of any further issues closer to the date of the rescheduled test, end quote. And there should be an image of their statement on the screen as well. This means that the test date can be pushed back even further than the 31st of March if they find another reason to do so. Fingers crossed that they don't, but don't stress about this, even though I know it's very frustrating because you don't have any control over this. What you do have control over, however, is the way you react to this circumstance. Are you going to be the one complaining, or are you going to face the reality of the situation and prepare accordingly for these next 3 weeks? You need to look ahead and put in the work. The students who are moaning and complaining will not be in the right mindset compared to students who are still working hard to get into a selective high school. If you are a parent, I know it sucks, but you have to be strong for your child. The more you complain in front of them, the more they will want to complain too. You want to be encouraging, motivating, and inspiring, and just say there's only 3 more weeks. Let's put in the work, because we've already put in so much work in the months prior to this. And if it does get pushed back, you still have to work around that as well. In conclusion, I think that's basically everything about my thoughts in regards to this situation. If you had any comments that you wanted to share, write it down in the comments below. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'm always going to be here providing you guys support. I mainly reply to every single comment, so make sure to ask your questions down below or just share some advice for someone. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.